When it comes to getting the most accurate color out of your camera, there are many options and approaches that you can consider. But what is accurate may not be truly accurate. Recently, Gerald Undone posted a video breaking down his camera profiling process and why color looks different on certain sensors. And as someone that loves this subject, I was so excited to see it, honestly. I really appreciate getting to see his process and getting a peek into another person's take on this subject. Now, I've actually been researching this same topic extensively this entire last year and have some discoveries that weren't addressed in his video that I believe would be helpful as an additional resource. Now, I want to preface, this video is going to be long and I'm going to address tons of different topics in this field, like how to tell the difference between camera sensors, how to properly profile a camera, color chart problems and fixes that I encountered, as well as pitfalls with color space transforms. Full disclosure, we have created conversion LUTs as well that are built on machine learning and take into account color drift in different camera systems. Now, as you can tell, I'm super excited about this topic and have a ton to share, so let's get started. So here I am in DaVinci Resolve, and I want to first start off by talking about what is a conversion LUT or a base LUT. And a conversion LUT is a LUT that transforms your footage from a color space and gamma to another one. So for instance, we can take Gamut 3 Cine, S-Log3, which is filmed on the Sony FX3, for instance, and then we're going to a different color space, Rec 79 Gamma 2.4. You could also go to DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. So in its simplest form, it is known as a technical transform, and it's broken down into two parts, color space and gamma. So that leads me into discussing the pitfalls that happen with a color space transform. And this is where I was getting to the crux of that conversation, where we can say that, hey, I want the most accurate conversion LUT. But when we assume color space transforms are accurate, when in reality, they're not taking into account the differences in the sensors and your color looks different. Therefore, not really accurate. And we're going to break that down in a second. So here I have an FX3 shot right here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up my scopes here, and we're going to look at this vector scope, and we're going to analyze how the color is being displayed. I'm also going to look at a second clip, which is going to be the FX6, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on some windowing here so that we can see this. So right off the bat, I have this shot right here. So this first one is just one of these charts that we're looking at. And you can see on the vector scope where all those colors are being positioned. Kind of like what Gerald was posting in his video. You can look at the vector scope and see what the colors are doing. And whenever we're looking at a color space transform on this individual chart, we can see what it looks like. And let's go ahead and put the exact same color space transform on an FX3, which is filmed in S-Log3 and S-Gamut 3 Cine. And then this is what it looks like. So we went ahead and added another color space transform right here. And we have, I'm going to switch to DaVinci tone mapping just for now. Make sure that the other one is the same so that we're looking at the exact same. I'm going to turn off saturation compression just for this. All right. And now we have the exact same color applied to the same profile from two different cameras. And we can see that there are differences because of the vector scope. And what I can tell, this is the FX6 over here, is that it is more vibrant. There's more saturation in the magentas. We can see it's pushing further over there. And also the blues. Let's take a look at the blues. What's happening with the blues? The blues are leaning, I would say, a little bit more purple. Or you could say the FX3 is leaning more, I guess, blue or cyan. And then the greens are pretty close. So everything looks pretty good, but there's are some color differences. And also we can tell, look at this, the reds are leaning more pink. So if you're filming on the FX6, it's going to look more pink. Now, you could also say, oh, the FX3 just looks more red. And we need some kind of objective way to tell what that is. And in this unique case, I have a image that comes along with this color chart. And this is a color chart from DSC Labs, and they provide a color accurate image that you can display over the chart to make sure that everything matches. And so I'm using this as more of my objective reality that these are what the colors should look like. And when we turn it on, and I'm just going to highlight just the FX3 for now, we're going to look at this vector scope. And we're going to see that the colors match up pretty well. We can see greens are just slightly off, but not too much, honestly. Cyan looks good. Blues are a little I think they're a little tricky, but I think they're pretty great. But yeah, we can see that the magentas are not fully moved over. So it should be leaning here. And that is a way that we can tell what the color should be. Now, if I turned on the FX6 instead of the FX3, we can see that it's further off. That's why I would say the FX3 is more color accurate than the FX6. We can see that whenever we apply a color space transform that we are getting different results. So when we say something is accurate, do we actually mean it's accurate? And that's where I'm getting to the point, and what Gerald is really pushing in is that there are so many variances between different camera sensors. You're getting different color responses and values. So that was something I just definitely wanted to highlight. And that leads to the differences between all these different cameras. I mean, I've been profiling over 50 cameras now, and one thing that I've noticed is DJI and Panasonic have the most variety. Just like Gerald was talking about with DJI, each drone, the color is a little bit different between all the different profiles and the different drones that you're choosing. And I saw the exact same thing. And then also with Panasonic, I have the GH6, you have the GH7, you have the S5 II sensor, you have the S1 II, the S1R2, and those are all not even sharing the same LUT. And there's differences between that. So that's kind of where I really get excited about color profiling and finding a way to match all these collectively together. The hardest ones that I've worked with, honestly, have been Panasonic and DJI. The easiest has been Sony, Blackmagic, like Red, Zcam, honestly. So those are some that are a lot easier to match, and I'm going to kind of break that down later. Also, I will be showing you my entire process later in this video if you stick around. If you want to see how I've developed our own BaseLUTs and conversions and what that looks like, stick around to the end, because that's what I'm going to get to. But as we're looking through all this stuff behind the different cameras, it's important to identify the differences between the camera sensors. And there are a couple ways to identify the differences. As you can see here, I have a power window that is highlighting these two charts from this camera. I'm going to go ahead and expand that and show a couple more charts here. So that's the FX6, and then this is going to be the FX3. So now we have more color to look at and kind of see how everything is being handled. And we can see more variety. We can see there's more issues that we're starting to recognize when we have more charts that we're looking at. So two ways that you can tell the difference between camera sensors if you're wanting to look at the differences is obviously like this. Just place two images above and you can power window them, and then you can look at the differences in the vector scope. This is primarily one way that you can do it. There's also another way that I have done that has been really amazing, and one of the ways that you can do that, I'm just going to reopen this clip up so you can see everything, is I ended up taking this clip and just windowing out the SG chart here, this color checker chart. And then I can send this through some scripting. So there is a Python script that Thatcher Freeman created that is absolutely phenomenal, and it helps you identify the differences between the different camera sensors. It's honestly creating a matrix, but I've used it to be able to identify the difference, and I can even get the delta E value to know how close they are or not. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that right now. So this right here is two images. So what I did is I would export the FX6, and then I would export a still in the FX3. And then I'd run it through some Python scripts, and it would spit out this image that shows me the difference between the source and the target. So as we can tell right now, the source, this is going to be the FX6. So we're able to look at the colors and identify where things look differently. So we can tell that the density in the blues are a little bit different. We can see some reds and purples, or the magentas and purples, and the reds are looking a little bit more pink. And that's where we saw that in the vector scope. But now we can really fine tune and check that. Then we're going to go ahead and look at, this is the FX6. So sorry, this was the FX3 color, the left side, FX6 is the right side. And this software will also, or this script will find a matrix and try to match them together. And then the result is here, which honestly, this is a pretty close match. It gets it really close. There's just a little bit of density levels, luminance levels in the reds that need to be dialed in. But overall, this is almost a perfect match. So that is how I can match the two cameras together, but also that's how you can tell the difference between all the different camera sensors. So this has been super helpful when I'm looking at all the different drone footage and I'm looking at the charts. This also takes into account any discrepancies in white balance or exposure. So you're really looking at just the color differences. And so I just wanted to share with you, that was the second way that I found out that's really helpful whenever you're wanting to identify the difference between different camera sensors. Now that leads me to discussing color charts. As you can see, I have a lot of color charts that I've been using. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and even 1, 5 here in the shadows because I wanted to check some of that. So as I'm profiling, I'm noticing that it's really important to get good results with the charts. And I had some problems whenever I was shooting them, and then I'd profile them, and then when I tried again, things were getting different results. And a lot of it came down to the way that you're holding or the way that you're displaying that color chart and the light source, which is extremely important. So I want to show you here that I have a chart, and what I did was we're going to go ahead and look at this scopes here, and we can see this X pattern that we're getting from the grayscale patches, and then we also have some color patches to be able to see how it looks like on the vector scope. And as I'm moving it, you can tell right there when I dip it down, I'm getting a lot more darker results. And then as I lift it up, I'm starting to get a little bit reflection from my light source, which is causing some saturation and density levels to be adjusted, which I don't want. You want everything to be pure, like great reflections. You want to have it dialed in. Now going to the side helps reduce some reflection. So sometimes angling it looks really well, but you want to be careful of, if you have one light source, to make sure it's dialed in. If you have a light source coming from the side, you will get inconsistent results because you can see the way it's bending the grayscale patches here. I'm to the side and my light is coming from right here facing down. You want to have a 45-degree angle from that. Ideally, it's best to have two light sources from the side instead of just one. But if you do, you want them 45 facing it, and then you want the flat chart. So getting the right angle on the chart is super important whenever you're considering and trying to get a good match between different cameras. Sometimes I had it tilted wrong, and then I'm making adjustments only to realize that, okay, that doesn't apply well on this other shot because of that change. So every decision I make, you need to make sure it's dialed in because you had proper alignment with your color charts. Another thing that was really helpful is as I was contemplating how to actually profile this, I talked with Thatcher Freeman a little bit about this because I'm using some of his scripts in order to do that. And the big thing was to capture the different exposure brackets between the profile. So here you can see I have a black lens cap shot on, and then I'm exposing up one exposure stop incrementally until I get to a clipping point where I can tell where this profile is clipping on this sensor, which there's different clipping points depending on what profile you're using and which camera. So this was really important. And then what I would do is I would feed this through a learning algorithm, and we would come up with this. So here are all the clips that I had that I was profiling from this one camera. And I believe this is the FX3. So, and I profiled this, and then I would run it through this algorithm, this scripting that would learn to try to recreate a perfect curve to properly match them. And then they matched everything really well. And then I can get some results and tell how close it was and the curve information. Now, this, I'll be completely honest, this isn't completely necessary whenever you're working with profiles that are already available in a color space transform, because you already have the white papers. You can already tell what the color primary should be, where they're moving. You can already tell the gamma curve. So it's not quite necessary. However, it does help with profiles and cameras that are not listed in a color space transform, like F-Gamut C whenever we're working with Fuji. Also working with OM Log 400 from an Olympus camera, or Z-Cam with Z-Log 2. Also, the big one is D-Log M, which we know from a drone, there's no support for that D-Log M. However, I've built D-Log M this way, and I even have it available in DaVinci Wide Gamut, which I think is really cool. And that was where the process was coming into, but it was really important to be able to look at that. And as I'm considering the shot here, I would go into Fusion and I would have all of my bracketed shots out here so that I can export these and run them through that process. So that was just a little bit of an insight into that. I can go super deep. If you want to see a video on my BaseLUT breakdown on each node and each structure, let me know in the comments. But this, I think, is a really great way to make sure that you're capturing all the information that you need to properly create the proper curve, the gamma curve, and then you can work through and get the proper matrix for a camera profile. Now, as you're profiling different cameras, it's really important to make sure that you're working with the proper middle gray exposure. Let me see if I have a clip here. Okay, so here is a clip that was filmed on the in Canon Log 3. And this is Canon Log 3. I'm going to go ahead and disable LUT. This is what the log footage looked like. And what we need to do is whenever we're working with a conversion LUT, it's important to take into account the manufacturer's recommended middle gray settings. And in this case, Canon Log 3 is recommended to be exposed around 34 on the IRE scale. So if I come over here and I look at my neutral patch here, and then we pull this up, let me make sure that we have, okay, 34 listed here. So this is 34 on the IRE scale. Okay. This is what Canon recommends is properly exposed for the most dynamic range. Remember, the recommended middle gray is for the most dynamic range from a camera sensor, not necessarily the cleanest noise. That's why some people are like, hey, overexposed is so much better. A lot of the reason for that is just to have cleaner noise. It's not getting you better dynamic range. If you want the most dynamic range, you stick to the native ISO based off that camera if there is one, and then also the recommended middle gray from the camera manufacturer. So Canon Log 3 is around 34. And then whenever we want to convert that to display, which is Rec 709, Rec 709 is the 18% middle gray should land at 42 on the IRE scale. So if we properly convert this to Rec 709, that 34 should move up to 42. And you can see that it does. So we know that that is properly exposed. If we're using a color space transform, so here's Canon Log 3, you can see that it's moving it up to about probably 41. And primarily the reason for that is the tone mapping. So tone mapping is going to be pulling down and rolling off that, but it kind of dips into middle gray area a little bit. So one thing that's really important is following the path of middle gray. Colin Kelly has talked about this a lot in his videos, but when we're looking at this, let's go ahead and start with our log file. So this middle gray is at 34. If we want to go ahead and move into DaVinci Wide Gamut, so we're going to take Canon Log 3, we're going to go to DaVinci Wide Gamut. Where is DaVinci Wide Gamut's middle gray? That is actually 34 IRE as well. It's 33.6, I think. So this should stay right around there. If we convert properly to DaVinci Intermediate, look at that. It's staying right around that point. And then when we go from DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709 with no tone mapping, it should move up to about 42. And right there, it's just a little bit over. And I think our middle could be a little bit lower, the exposure for the shot. So this is really close, but that is how you make sure that that middle gray is locked in. And then whenever you start getting into tone mapping, that is where it's going to roll off that, and you'll see a change in your highlights and stuff like that. But that is really important as we're considering our middle gray patch and we're profiling that. Another thing to consider is multiple charts help get better results. I noticed that whenever I was looking at my footage and I wanted to get a really good result, let me back this up here. Whenever I was building our BaseLUTs and a conversion for here, if I only had one chart, I wasn't seeing the big picture. And honestly, adding the Macbeth chart helped a lot because the way the colors are displayed in here are extra vibrant. And so I'm able to see that that extra range of color. And then I have this other chart here, and I have this one from Calibrate, and I have another one, DCA Labs, to see how things go into the shadows. So one thing I would recommend is try having a lot more charts whenever you're checking a camera. Because I feel like it helps give a better picture whenever we're looking at colors. Some things we might not see that are bending differently or being displayed whenever we are, expanding our saturation levels properly. For one chart might be overcompensating for another, or we might realize, hey, there's some weird things going on with this camera sensor, and even though it's correct, I'm getting different results. And that was really helpful for me because I would profile like this this chart and then do it on another one, but then I have this one, and I was getting just better results whenever I could kind of see them both together. And then one thing though, you kind of want to pick just one to use as your reference. So I use the Macbeth chart as my reference, and then I use this as like supporting information whenever I'm considering adjustments for these profiles. If you want to know where middle gray should be for each camera, that is where the white papers come in. So I have a section here where I've been just looking through all of the profiles and reading all the documents on the white papers and going through, okay, what is the middle gray? Where is the clipping points? What cameras support what different profiles? What the curves should look like? So I've kind of built kind of a full archive system for all this white papers. And then what I did is I actually built probably the most comprehensive list for all camera profiles. So here, this is a master list of all the profiles and cameras that I have already profiled and all the information for that. This is the most extensive list. I don't see this anywhere online. Some of the stuff I've had to figure out on my own. And this has also been really helpful for Gerald Undone, because one thing that I would look at is I would pull up a camera and I would want to see, hey, does this have like dual native ISO? And I could tell a video that he would post and be like, okay, does not officially support a dual native ISO. However, the footage produces a cleaner result at, say, 4000 ISO. And a lot of that information I was able to pull also from Gerald's videos and researching Reddit threads and people's responses online. And then also just renting the cameras. I've rented all these cameras and used them, and we're able to test this out on my own just to double check. But this is the most extensive list out there, I believe. This has all the native ISO information, the clipping points, where middle gray should be in IRE, but also in the 10-bit scale, so if you want to be more precise. And then it gets even more robust where I start breaking down the different cameras and which ones match. Okay, so for instance, if we're going to take a look at Sony, as I'm profiling all this stuff, let me go up to right there. Sony, I was like, okay, I've noticed that the A7 IV doesn't match any of the other cameras, but the A7R5 and the FX30 and A6700 all look the same. So whenever I did my color sensor check, I noticed those cameras are the same. A7S3 and FX3 are the same, but they're not the same as the other ones. And the FX6 is different. So this has been really helpful to break down which cameras actually match. And this is also where I've noticed the most variety comes from. I feel like Panasonic, but I've also profiled the most Panasonic cameras so far. And then we can take a look at DJI, which, man, DJI, they are rough, to be honest. Here, I haven't seen one camera that quite matches. The Mavic 2 Pro and the Mavic Air 2S, I noticed match. But overall, I have the Osmo Action 5 Pro, Osmo Pocket 3, the 4D 6K sensor, Mavic 3 Pro and D-Log M, and D-Log Classic, Avata 2. All these that I've profiled, none of them have matching LUTs. So they all need their own individual adjustment. So that's been really helpful. And then even like on Fuji, having the GFX 100 Mark II matches the XH2 actually. And then, but the XH2S doesn't match the other ones. XT5 and X100 Mark 6, that one matches. So kind of looking at all this information has been really helpful, especially with Canon. Like the R5 Mark II matches the C80. The R5C matches the C70, but those two don't match. And that's where I've built this list. I've actually created this and have implemented this onto our website. So if you go to gamut.io and you look at our BaseLUTs, if you look for your camera, it will have this information on there. So if you're really curious to know what's the native ISO, does it have a dual, what are the clipping points, where should I be within my spectrum, this is probably one of the most robust lists out there. And I can share this with you all if you want to know more. But this is, and it's a growing list. I'm literally profiling cameras every month, adding to this. And as I do, I'll be updating that site. But that is where I get my middle gray information, so that whenever I am profiling, I'm making sure I'm referencing the objective manufacturer's suggestion, so that we're getting really good results. And when we are looking at middle gray and we're checking our clips, The important aspects of it, because, is middle gray and black levels. That is also what's provided usually in the white papers. The white clipping point is going to change because of tone mapping. So that one you can't have like an actual hard number, I guess you could kind of say, because tone mapping is what is going to roll that off whenever we're going to display like Rec 709. So that leads us into tone mapping. Let's go ahead and talk about tone mapping. And that is where we are going to be looking at shots that need to have tone mapping enabled. And I'm going to go ahead and show this one clip here because I think this is a good example of the importance of tone mapping. So we're looking at this clip, and I'm looking at my vector scope, and I'm looking at my waveform, and I can tell you right off the bat, I know that Vlog, which this was filmed on Vlog on the S1H, is supposed to clip at 88 IRE. We have this extra information that is going on, which technically I guess shouldn't be happening, but we want to make sure that our tone mapping is in place so that it pulls everything into a nice, pleasing result. And if we add a color space transform, and we go to Rec 79 Gamut 2.4, DaVinci tone mapping, and then also I have saturation compression. Let's just turn off the tone mapping first, and let's turn this on. This is what the image looks like. Obviously, we're out of bounds. I'm going to switch this away from 2x zoom so we can see it, and you can see we're clipping. We're at the edge of our gamut mapping. One thing that we could do is we could also show chromaticity. You can see we are just right up against the bounds of that space because we're in Rec 709 and that color is just being destroyed or it's being clamped. So then we need to come over to our tone mapping, and there's different results. Luminance mapping is going to be more like accurate, like the color goes to the edge and then just stops. It doesn't bend a certain way or twist. However, it might not be the most pleasing, and that's where I prefer to use DaVinci, which kind of edges that off. So you can see as it's going to the extreme, it kind of causes some issues. DaVinci will kind of roll that a little bit better, and that's where the tone mapping or the gamut compression is coming into play, because the tone mapping is going to be more of that highlight white levels, and then you have the gamut compression, which is more of the color bounds of that saturation. Now, then we need gamut mapping here, which we can turn on saturation compression, and then we have this. And let's go to this clip. So this is where really extreme situation, obviously, but I want to make sure that the conversions that we're using in the color space transforms are responding the way they should. And we can see we're getting extremely strong blue cast. And then if we actually go from Vlog to DaVinci Wide Gamut, then DaVinci Wide Gamut to Rec 709, this actually helps a little bit. We're still getting some weird results, but that is a little bit better. If you're ever having some issues, sometimes going to a wider color space and then coming back to Rec 709 could help. But ultimately, like, this is what our BaseLUT does. And if you compare that to the color space transform, it's just more pleasing, and it still holds all the color really well. There's no weird haloing going on or anything like that you can see. Like this DaVinci Wide Gamut, the way it's handling that cyan color is a little bit weird. But that is something to consider whenever you're looking at tone mapping. And whenever I was building this out, I wanted to make sure that I used a really good tone mapping option. And I'm going to come over here to this clip and show you this raw file. So this is on the S1 II, the Lumix S1 II. And if we look at Vlog, we can see that it's going right about here. And then we have this all within bounds, which looks good. But if we turned off our tone mapping, you can see that it is just extreme. We need to make sure that we're protecting that. And tone mapping is going to be really important when it comes to conversions. So this one, let's go ahead and add DaVinci, which I feel like looks the most pleasing. And then if we want to, we can add saturation compression to just pull back anything that's a little extreme. The difference between DaVinci and Luminance, you can see the reds here. So technically this is a little bit more accurate, but it's going to cause some clamping issues, and it's not going to roll off nicely. So choosing the way that rolls off is really important. So whenever I was building our conversions, I decided to go with the 2499 DRT. Now the reason for the DRT is the way it handles that is different than a color space transform, and I'm going to show you how. So here we have Vlog to V709 for the VariCam 35. This is the Vlog LUT from Panasonic, and this is what it looks like. So here's the colors. Whenever you apply the LUT, this is how it's pushing everything to the edges, and this is what it looks like. So However, whenever we're using the ones that we created with $24.99, the shape is different. Look at the shape that it creates. And what this is doing is it's pulling all those really saturated colors and bright areas and kind of rolling them nicely into one point. So you're going to get a really nice highlight roll off, and you're going to get some really nice saturated colors kind of bending nicely. And that is the difference between these two. And I ultimately decided to go with $24.99 for our version. Now, I had to do a lot of tweaks to it because right out of the gate, $24.99 leans like the blues a little bit more cyan. And there's some other color things that I felt like weren't as accurate right out of the gate. So I needed to make some adjustments. So I made some adjustments, and then I also ran it, did a little sandwich and have the JP $24.99 DRT split up so that I could do some other tweaks, which I'll go over this whole pipeline here in a second. But $24.99 was my choice. I felt like it did really great with tone mapping and gamut compression. So I can feel confident looking at shots like this one that I'm going to get a really good result if I use this DRT. So I'm not going to have hardly any issues. And if I do, it's going to pull it in nicely. So I'm not worried about it. But that was one of the areas that I wanted to focus on, showcasing the importance of tone mapping. So now that I've gone over a lot of the different things on, the pitfalls of color space transforms, things to consider with color charts, how to tell the difference between camera sensors, I wanted to break down the pipeline and give you a little bit of a little peek into the pipeline that I've created for building our conversion LUTs. And I think this is pretty powerful and really cool on how this works. If I take a look at this stuff, let me see what shot. So this clip is, okay, so this one is the Osmo Pocket 3. This is the Osmo Pocket 3, and whenever I wanted to profile this clip, I'm looking at this image right here. This is the flat image. I'm looking at the curves and how it looks on the waveform and vector scope. Like I said, the first two parts that are primarily make up a conversion LUT are going to be the color space and the gamma. So the steps I like to take is I want to start with using a log to linear curve. I want to get into linear. And because there's no white papers on D-Log-M, we have to figure this out. And that's where I used that structure of exporting all these stills of different exposure brackets, running it through an algorithm, a learning algorithm, and then we'll create the actual, the proper curve. So this corrects all of these and makes them match perfectly by finding the best curve. And once I get that curve data, I run that in and I apply that here. So I'll have our log to lin curve right here, and now I'm in linear. And then the next thing that I want to do is I take this and I want to run that and get a good matrix that will properly match based off of either color data from the chart manufacturer or another camera that's like my hero image that I want to match. So just like I showed you over here, where I'm matching the matrix between the FX6 and the FX3, I would do that with my hero shot that I use. And then here's the matrix. So now we have the matrix changed. Now I can switch from DaVinci Wide Gamut Linear to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. And now I'm in DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate. So now this is D-Log-M on the Osmo Pocket 3 profiled for D-Log or for DaVinci Wide Gamut, which is fantastic. And then after that, I would go into my display, which I'm going to use $24.99. And then these are the two functions of $24.99. And here, without any other adjustments, this is what it looks like. And honestly, this is pretty close. It looks really good. I get really great results. But some cameras like DJI require a lot more nuance and work. So, for instance, I know these greens are a little maybe too warm. The blues are leaning too cyan. This should be a little bit more on the blue spectrum. So whenever I'm comparing them with my hero shot, I'll have to make some other adjustments. And in this case, I needed to do a shift like this. So here I shifted the colors using a DCTL. And when I did that, now I need to adjust for the density or the luminance of those charts. And then here I made an adjustment for the density levels. And then I made a skin bias adjustment because I noticed that whenever I'm matching the cameras, I felt like it was slightly more yellow with the skin tones, and they needed to be a little bit more optimized. So I made a skin bias node, and that honestly helped make everything look really great. Whenever I did a lot of testing on real world footage, this honestly helped make it shine and bring it into a nice color palette. After that, I did a small adjustment for pleasing skin tones that I've kind of developed, and then also the clipping point. If I want to make sure that my white levels are clipping at 100% for D-Log M on the Osmo Pocket 3, I have this that I can do. And you can see it'll affect the colors a little bit, but I'd turn that on at the end after I've done a perfect match. And then this is kind of the result. I had another color warp that I need to do a little bit of a tweak on, but I had some issues and breakage there, so I'll give you some tips on how to fix that later. But this helped kind of get it in a better space. And honestly, this works fantastic. So now if I want to color grade the Osmo Pocket 3 and DaVinci Wide Gamut, I just have to turn off this section, and now I'm grading in DaVinci Wide Gamut, and I get all the flexibility there. Or if I want to go to display, I do this here. So this has been really helpful with building this pipeline. I wanted to future-proof it and make sure that all of you get access to DaVinci Wide Gamut. So no matter what BaseLUT you use, that will have a DaVinci Wide Gamut alternative option there. So even OM Log 400 on Olympus, I have going to DaVinci Wide Gamut. But I'm trying to think of any other crazy profiles. Yeah, like Z Log 2, we have that. And we're going to be doing GoPro next and some other things. So this has been really helpful. I also have F Gamut C for Fuji. So I can just turn this off and be in F Gamut C to DaVinci Wide Gamut since there's no color space transform for that already. And this is how I've developed our pipeline for BaseLUTs. If you want to see this further in more detail, just let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make a future video breaking down the whole process, but this is the one that's worked for me and I've gotten really good results. Now, sometimes though, as I've been developing this, I've come across certain profiles that are much more difficult or need more adjustment. And sometimes in those cases, I can't simply do them with these DCTLs. I will run it through another code called RBF interpolation, where I will extract, thousands of color data information and then match them, and it'll spit out an adjustment LUT, and that gets me pretty close as well. But this is kind of the process for that. And then the big kicker is once you've kind of developed this and you want to make sure that you're looking at a really good image, let's go ahead and turn the BaseLUT on. I want to check it against I want to stress test it. I'm going to go ahead and do it on a Sony clip here. So we're looking at the FX3, and here is another tool that Thatcher Freeman has created called RGB chips. This helps make sure that I can see that the colors are looking pretty good. There's nothing looking weird, no negative levels or anything. But then the kicker here is the smooth one, gradient smooth chart. And this is where I can scan between all the different colors and see where the LUT or the conversion might break. So here I can tell the magentas and pinks are really strong, okay? And it doesn't really roll off that much. I'm getting a little bit of hard edges. It's still kind of blending okay. Let's take a look. We're scooting over. Okay, so right here, the blues and pinks. This is why I was seeing really intense blues on that one clip, that dancing clip with a lot of blues. This tells me that this conversion might break more in these blue ranges, which is what I did notice in that. So I can tell. So that's why going to DaVinci Wide Gamut is a little bit smoother. And whenever I created our BaseLUTs, we made sure that everything is extremely smooth as much as possible. So you can see the way it handles that color area looks really pleasing, really pleasing. So stress testing it was a really important step. That is the best way I found if you want to check a conversion LUT, or if you want to check your pipeline, like you're looking at a color space transform and why a color space transform might not be as accurate for your specific camera sensor, then you can run this. You'll probably get the same results, obviously, when you're working with a color space transform, but these tools are really great. Make sure that you're looking at linear, and then also your color timeline is in DaVinci Wide Gamut. That was just something I need to note. But after stress testing, then I run this into Lattice. With Lattice, I'll run it. I'll do a check on the profile. So I'll see how it looks on a clip and see where the highlights go. I'll check my cube shape, make sure nothing's looking really weird. And then I'll check my curve. See how my curve is going. If we're looking at the curve from Panasonic, we can see there's a little bit of color split tone, or something's going on right here where we can see a little bit of that other color. So I make sure that it's properly, like there's no color tint going on in the curve, and then I can change the size of that to be like 65 here. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and change my metadata so that you can tell, okay, this was developed for converting vlog v gamut to rec 709, and this is the version number on the date that we created it. So anytime there's updates, you can just check the metadata of the file. And that's super important to make sure everything is working really well. But overall, I want to make sure my output bounds are 0 to 1. And this is, once I do this, I'm pretty much done. So that is the development of our BaseLUTs. That is how we create it. That's how we stress test them and make sure that you're getting the best results. So hopefully this information has been helpful or at least informative into the differences between the various camera sensors. And when it comes to conversion LUTs, I hope you can see how much work actually goes into development for building these out and the different approaches to it. Honestly, I'm extremely proud of the results that we've made with BaseLUTs, and I would encourage you to go check them out if you can. You can visit gamut.io and click on BaseLUTs to find your camera. Also, let us know in the comments which camera you want to see us profile next, and don't forget to comment BaseLUT in the comments if you want to see a deep dive into how we created our BaseLUTs. Lastly, I hope that you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss another video. Until next time, happy grading.